Day number 34. Read the Bible in a year. Exodus chapter 13, 14, and 15. Chapter 13. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Sanctify to me all the firstborn, whatever opens the womb among the children of Israel, both of man and animal, it is mine." Moses said to the people, "Remember this day in which you came out of Egypt, out of the house of bondage, for by strength of hand the Lord brought you out of this place. No leavened bread shall be eaten. Today you go out in the month of Abib. It shall be, when the Lord brings you into the land of the Canaanite, and the Hittite, and the Amorite, and the Hivite, and the Jebusite, which he swore to your fathers to give you, a land flowing with milk and honey, that you shall keep this service in this month. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread, and in the seventh day shall be a feast to the Lord. Unleavened bread shall be eaten throughout the 7 days, and no leavened bread shall be seen with you. No yeast shall be seen with you within all your borders. You shall tell your son in that day, saying, 'It is because of that which the Lord did for me when I came out of Egypt.' It shall be for a sign to you on your hand and for a memorial between your eyes, that the Lord's law may be in your mouth. For with a strong hand the Lord has brought you out of Egypt. You shall therefore keep this ordinance in its season from year to year. It shall be, when the Lord brings you into the land of the Canaanite, as he swore to you and to your fathers, and will give it to you, that the Lord shall set apart, that you shall set apart to the Lord all that opens the womb, and every firstborn that comes from the animal, which you have. The males shall be the Lord's. Every firstborn of a donkey you shall redeem with a lamb, and if you will not redeem it, then you shall break its neck. And you shall redeem all the firstborn of man amongst your sons. It shall be, when your son asks you in time to come, saying, 'What is this?' that you should tell him, 'By the strength of hand the Lord brought us out of Egypt, from the house of bondage, when Pharaoh stubbornly refused to let us go. The Lord killed all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both the firstborn of man and the firstborn of livestock. Therefore I sacrifice to the Lord all that opens the womb, being males, but all the firstborn of my sons I redeem. It shall be for a sign on your hand and for symbols between your eyes, for by strength of hand the Lord brought us out of Egypt.' When Pharaoh had let the people go, God didn't lead them by the way of the land of the Philistines, although that was near. For God said, 'Lest perhaps the people change their minds when they see war, and they return to Egypt.' But God led the people around by the way of the wilderness, by the Red Sea, and the children of Israel went up armed out of the land of Egypt. Moses took the bones of Joseph with him, for he had made the children of Israel swear, saying, 'God will surely visit you, and you shall carry up my bones away from here with you.' They took their journey from Succoth and encamped at Etham, in the edge of the wilderness. The Lord went before them by day in a pillar of cloud, to lead them on their way, and by night in a pillar of fire, to give them light, that they might go by day and by night. The pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night didn't depart from before the people."
Exodus 14. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the children of Israel, that they turn back and encamp before Pihahiroth, between Migdol and the sea, before Baal Zephon. You shall encamp opposite it by the sea. Pharaoh will say of the children of Israel, 'They are entangled in the land. The wilderness has shut them in.' I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and he will follow after them. And I will get honor over Pharaoh and over all his armies, and the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord." They did so. The king of Egypt was told that the people had fled, and the heart of Pharaoh and of his servants was changed towards the people. And they said, "What is this we have done, that we have let Israel go from serving us?" He prepared his chariot and took his army with him, and he took 600 chosen chariots, and all the chariots of Egypt with captains over all of them. The Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh king of Egypt, and he pursued the children of Israel. For the children of Israel went out with a high hand. The Egyptians pursued them, all the horses and chariots of Pharaoh, his horsemen, and his army overtook them, encamping by the sea, beside Pihahiroth, before Baal-zephon. When Pharaoh came near, the children of Israel lifted up their eyes. The Egyptians were marching after them, and they were very afraid. The children of Israel cried out to the Lord. They said to Moses, "Because there were no graves in Egypt, have you taken us away to die in the wilderness? Why have you treated us this way, to bring us out of Egypt? Isn't this the word that we spoke to you in Egypt, saying, 'Leave us alone, that we may serve the Egyptians'? For it would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness." Moses said to the people, "Don't be afraid. Stand still and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will work for you today. For you will never again see the Egyptians whom you have seen today. The Lord will fight for you, and you shall be still." The Lord said to Moses, "Why do you cry to me? Speak to the children of Israel, that they may go forward. Lift up your rod and stretch out your hand over the sea and divide it. Then the children of Israel shall go into the middle of the sea on dry ground. Behold, I myself will harden the hearts of the Egyptians, and they will go in after them. I will get myself honor over Pharaoh and over all his armies, over his chariots and over his horsemen. The Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord, when I have gotten myself honor over Pharaoh, over his chariots, and over his horsemen." The angel of God, who went before the camp of Israel, moved and went behind them, and the pillar of cloud moved from before them and stood behind them. It came between the camp of Egypt and the camp of Israel. There was the cloud and the darkness, yet it gave light by night. One didn't come near the other all night. Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord caused the sea to go back by a strong east wind all night, and made the sea dry land, and the waters were divided. The children of Israel went into the middle of the sea on the dry ground, and the waters were a wall on the right and on their left. The Egyptians pursued and went in after them into the middle of the sea, all of Pharaoh's horses, his chariots, and his horsemen. In the morning watch, the Lord looked out on the Egyptian army through the pillar of fire and of cloud, and confused the Egyptian army. He took off their chariot wheels, and they drove them heavily, so that the Egyptians said, "Let's flee from the face of Israel, for the Lord fights for them against the Egyptians." The Lord said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand over the sea, that the waters may come again on the Egyptians, on their chariots and on their horsemen." Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the sea returned to its strength when the morning appeared, and the Egyptians fled against it. The Lord overthrew the Egyptians in the middle of the sea. The waters returned and covered the chariots and the horsemen, even all Pharaoh's army that went in after them into the sea. There remained not even one of them. But the children of Israel walked on dry land in the middle of the sea, and the waters were a wall on their right and on their left. The Lord saved Israel that day out of the hand of the Egyptians, and Israel saw that the Egyptians were dead on the seashore. Israel saw the great work which the Lord did to the Egyptians, and the people feared the Lord, and they believed in the Lord and in his servant Moses.
Exodus chapter 15. Then Moses and the children of Israel sang this song to the Lord and said, I will sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. He has thrown the horse and his rider into the sea. The Lord is my strength and song. He has become my salvation. This is my God, and I will praise him. My father's God, and I will exalt him. The Lord is a man of war. The Lord is his name. He has cast Pharaoh's chariots and his army into the sea. He has chosen captains. His chosen captains are sunk in the Red Sea. The deeps cover them. They went down into the depths like a stone. Your right hand, Lord, is glorious in power. Your right hand, Lord, dashes the enemy in pieces. In the greatness of your excellency, you overthrow those who rise up against you. You send out your wrath. It consumes them as stubble. With the blast of your nostrils, the waters were piled up. The flood stood upright as a heap. The deeps were congealed in the heart of the sea. The enemy said, I will pursue. I will overtake. I will divide the plunder. My desire will be satisfied on them. I will draw my sword. My hand will destroy them. You blew with your wind. The sea covered them. They sank like lead in the mighty waters. Who is like you, Lord, amongst the gods? Who is like you, glorious in holiness, fearful in praises, doing wonders? You stretched out your right hand. The earth swallowed them. You, in your loving kindness, have led the people that you have redeemed. You have guided them in your strength to your holy habitation. The peoples have heard. They tremble. Pangs have taken hold of the inhabitants of Philistia. Then the chiefs of Edom were dismayed. Trembling takes hold of the mighty men of Moab. All the inhabitants of Canaan have melted away. Terror and dread falls on them. By the greatness of your arm, they are as still as a stone, until your people pass over. Lord, until the people you have purchased pass over. You will bring them in and plant them in the mountain of your inheritance, the place, Lord, which you have made for yourself to dwell in, the sanctuary, Lord, which your hands have established. The Lord will reign forever and ever. For the horses of Pharaoh went in with his chariots and with his horsemen into the sea, and the Lord brought back the waters of the sea on them. But the children of Israel walked on dry land in the middle of the sea. Miriam, the prophetess, the sister of Aaron, took her tambourine in her hand, and all the women went out after her, tambourines and with dances. Miriam answered them, Sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. He has thrown the horse and his rider into the sea. Moses led Israel onward from the Red Sea, and they went out into the wilderness of Shur. And they went 3 days in the wilderness and found no water. When they came to Marah, they couldn't drink from the waters of Marah, for they were bitter. Therefore, its name was called Marah. The people murmured against Moses, saying, What shall we drink? Then he cried to the Lord. The Lord showed him a tree, and he threw it into the waters, and the waters were made sweet. Then he made a statue and an ordinance for them, and there he tested them. He said, If you will diligently listen to the Lord, your God's voice, and will do that which is right in his eyes, and will pay attention to his commandments, and keep all his statutes, I will put none of the diseases on which I have put on the Egyptians. For I am the Lord who heals you. They came to Elim, where there were 12 springs of water and 70 palm trees. They encamped there by the waters. Very interesting read. God really knew the hearts of his people, didn't he? He said that they would be afraid if they went through the land of the Philistines because of war. And as soon as they got into some trouble right on the edge of the sea, they started complaining. They turned to fear. And Moses had to remind them, don't be afraid.
Yeah, Moses had to be strong, confident, and persuasive to persuade that amount of people not to be afraid. And, they could see that the Egyptians were coming after them. So we could look at them and we could judge them. But if we put ourselves in their place, seeing a huge army, for example, an American army coming towards us, we're in our cities, we don't have weapons to protect ourselves. I think a natural human instinct would be
Fear.
fear.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. I read the other day there was actually 600,000 men plus women and children who were led out of Egypt by Moses. The burden that he would have had to carry to lead that many people is huge.
Yeah, so probably over 1 million people.
Probably over 1 million people. Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
And I also noticed how God had a fire at night in front of them and a cloud during the day, and they would follow that. That would be what guided them. It was God's spirit. They were led by God, by his angel, God's angel or his spirit. And then when it was time for them to be protected from the Egyptians, those transferred from being in front of them to being behind them. So there was this spiritual wall between the people, the Israelites, and the Egyptian army.
Yeah.
And in other words, he was in between. He was protecting them himself.
Yeah.
He was the wall between them. There was no way that the Egyptian army was going to get past him.
Yeah. It reminds me of how in our lives we can go through some challenging times, and sometimes we look around and think there's no way out. And then God can do a miracle. I think we shouldn't undersell God's power in our lives and how he does great things. And never try and justify it away and say, oh, it's just a coincidence. But remember that God is watching over us.
And I noticed that there's a lot of remember, don't forget, remember. And they even made a song so that they could sing it for generations to come.
Yeah.
To remind them of what God did very specifically. When I think about how easy it is to remember a story, to remember a song when there's music, right? The music, the beat, we can remember the words when we have the song.
Yeah. When
we have the music. So songs actually help us to remember things easier. More easily. And why don't we do that today? I was thinking about that, how God is saying, use a song, use songs to remember what I've done. Because, we sing songs at church from things that happened a long time ago, but he continues to work. There's things that he's even done in our lives. I think we should start making songs about the things that God does now, that he's done in the past 100 years, 200 years, 10 years, 5 years, the things that he's done in our lives so that we don't forget.
True. And he reminds Moses, he said, when you go into the land and your children ask why you're doing these things, it's to help them remember what God did. Even more so, remember always what God is doing in your life, what he's done in your life.
There's so much, again, to do with remembering, not forgetting, because it helps us to keep strong in our faith.
True.
When we look and see, this is what God has done in my life, this is what God has done in other lives. When we go through scary times or difficult times, it helps us to remember who God is, who he really is, not who we want him to be when we're afraid. And that is, where are you? But who he really is, the things that he's done and that he will do again.
Yeah, no, it's so true. It's great. Thanks for joining. See you next day.